are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how's it going today?
It's going well. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. You know, we're getting towards the end of the playoffs. We're getting towards the dog days of summer a little bit here. We do have some Flyers news to talk about, a little bit of a Stanley Cup preview for you later in the show. As we're diving into that, make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Search YWT over there. Hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out. So, all right, diving right into it. I think we start with the biggest Flyers news.
Yeah,
of the recent
let me
segment.
switch over to this slide and make sure you're in on this. There we go. Now we're good.
Absolutely, and I'm hoping you started with the story that I think makes the most sense with. Yes, you
absolutely
did.
I did.
Absolutely. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, you can see the graphic here. The Philadelphia Flyers announced that Tyson Foerster has signed a 2-year contract extension. Kevin, talk me through this deal. What are we looking at here? Definitely your classic bridge deal.
Yeah, and I think it's a great deal for both sides. What I love about it is that both sides get something that I think is desperately needed. The Flyers get more time to see if Tyson Foerster really has in him what you hope he has in him. You know, 20 goal season as a rookie, 25 goals in his second season. Now you start to make the natural progression to the next step. Do you get, can he get to 30, 35? You start to think about those possibilities, and that gives you time to see if that is a possibility without committing long term. And Foerster bets on himself and basically makes that decision to say, I can show you that I can do it, and then I'll make more money down the stretch when the time comes. And it's such a friendly deal from the money standpoint. $3.75 million for a guy who's probably going to put up 25 again sounds great. And then you get those 2 years, the rest of this offseason and next to kind of play around with that number before you go into extension talk and things like that. So that's another reason why, and beyond actually, because it's this upcoming season and next. So you have, like I said, you have next offseason to deal with this as well. So you determine kind of what more you want to add around him too. Like, I don't know if it changes much about what we think his ceiling is going to be in terms of his role. Like, I don't think he's a top line player. I think he's a second line player probably at best, but you give yourself a chance to see if there's more in the tank than that. Maybe the ceiling is higher than we envision. So I love the deal.
And I love the deal too. Like you said, it makes sense for Foerster. He bets on himself after strong performing with Team Canada at World Championships. He gets to build upon that. And, we've talked about it before. We talked about it on the show when that happened. Tyson Foerster's not going to be on the Olympic roster for Team Canada next Olympics, but he's in that conversation. And if he goes to World Championships every year, he's getting himself noticed on that Hockey Canada kind of stage. He is setting himself up for some big things. And another thing that goes in his favor on this is something that I've been talking about all year, and we got confirmation of a couple of months ago. The cap's going to be like $20 million higher in 2 years when he's negotiating his next deal. And if he grows into that 30, 35, maybe he pushes 40, kind of like you were talking about.
Yeah.
As far as goals in a season go, like you're getting double digits at that point with where the cap's going to be, and maybe
potentially
you clear it.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's a little ambitious at the start of this thing, but the World Championships thing is a big deal though that you brought up, because once you put yourself on that radar like that and don't look out of place either, that not only does that help his cause moving forward if he continues to have to play in that type of situation, but I feel like that makes this a tidy piece of business from the Flyers, because they already have this done before they do anything else. It's almost like it's essentially your first roster decision of the offseason. And I think that's a big deal that you got this one done now. You're going to have a deal to work out with Noah Cates. You're going to have a deal to work out with Cam York. And when you get to that territory, because like the other restricted free agent on the roster is Jacob Pelletier, and I don't think that should be anything substantial there. So
that I think the Jacob Pelletier deal will look much closer to the next deal we're going to talk about. But as far as Tyson Foerster goes, you get 2 years of a guy under $4 million who might score 30 goals for you. So in the meantime, you have an opportunity to surround him with some talent, like you mentioned. You got a little
Right.
cap space while he's making less than 4, and then you take a look and you see what it makes sense to do in 2 years.
Well, and I wonder if this is, especially if they're going to start to be more, I don't want to say make it that like that aggressive is completely the right word here, but if they start to venture into the buyer's market of other, whether it's via trade or free agency or whatever it is, as you start to move that direction, I wonder if there's going to be a shift in the way they approach in-house decisions. When the York contract comes up or when the Cates contract comes up, because do you want to give, we were talking about Foerster toward the end of the year and going, is it possible he gets for 20, then 25 goals, that he gets what Joel Farabee got with his first contract extension and gets something along the lines of 5x5 or maybe slightly more if we adjust for where the cap's
Right.
going? Is that possible because they really want to commit to him? And instead, both sides kind of looked at this and went, we don't need to do that. It's, we're looking in the 2 to 3 year territory because and it's funny because even if they would have gone to the third year, that has nothing to do with making it to UFA status. He still had years left for that. It wasn't that at all. It
Right.
was just, to me, it's just about exactly what you talked about, where the market's going to go. And it's like, okay, listen, if I can maximize that in 2 years, sure, why not? And I wonder now if we're going to see the same thing from York and Cates, if they decide to do this, if they decide to do the same thing from their own personal perspective, or if the Flyers kind of want that short-term deal because they're not convinced. Noah Cates played great during most of the year from a defensive perspective, but the offense didn't always come around. Is that what you're waiting to see? You say 2 more years. Let's see if you've got it in you. With York, it's kind of all of the above, right? He's had good defensive moments. He's had good offensive moments, not nearly consistent enough. Are you looking at are you even looking possibly at a year or two just to say, I need to see the next level? And if I'm not convinced, we might try to find somebody else who can play the same minutes and same role.
And when the salary cap first came around in 2006, in the mid 2000s, for a long time, the meta game as far as NHL GMs were concerned was that you have your 3-year ELC with a guy, and then you sign him to a 2 or 3 year bridge deal, and then you lock him up long term. And for a
Yeah.
long time, that was just kind of the way it went. And teams were buying 4, 5, 6 years of free agency and getting long term deals on good values, and that's how you end up with like the Nathan McKinnon deal and all sorts of other deals. And then as time went on, players kind of smartened up a little. Well, not necessarily players smartened up. The metagame changed, and those bridge deals kind of started to disappear a little bit because the logic now became, okay, well, your window shifts, right? Because when we were growing up, NHL players hit their primes from 28 to 32, and now by the time a guy's 29, he's on his way downhill, right? Like
Potentially, yeah.
right, like the prime for an elite athlete has kind of shifted forward. So teams and also athletes are send we're signing longer term contracts straight out of the ELC because the team gets the comfort of the best years out of the player cashes in while he can. It all makes a whole lot of sense. And then, the
Yeah.
younger player still signs young enough that he can sign another big deal after
Well,
that.
the other reason I think that also happened is because when you kept having waves of top draft picks come in that were worthy of that long-term
Mm-hmm.
massive contract effective immediately when they could sign it, I think teams started to treat everybody that way. When Austin Matthews is signing the contract, he does, or Connor McDavid is signing the contract, he does, and those are obviously substantial players. Then you see everybody getting those deals. Jack Hughes is going to get that same deal, whether he's on that level or not. He's at moments he is, but you know what I mean? It's like,
See, but it's really funny to me that you mentioned those two specific players in terms of deals signed.
mm-hmm,
Because Connor McDavid did do that. He signed the big long extension straight out of the ELC and signed an 8 year.
mm-hmm.
How long did Austin Matthews sign for?
Yeah, his was what, 4?
5.
Yeah.
He walked himself straight to free agency, and his
And then
his
elected to
second.
stay, but
But then, even then, it was only a 4 year deal. Austin
yeah,
Matthews has not signed a long term deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs, not a real long one. Now,
right.
William Nylander did. He did his
Sure.
second, and then he signed the long term forever contract. But Austin Matthews is going to cash in again when he's 29 or 30.
Well, and the interesting part about both of those, like about some of these scenarios also is that we're only now talking about where the cap is going to go and it's going to open up to have more space. But when it was a flat cap for 3 years because of COVID hitting things like that, I think everybody changed their tune and it was like, okay, I'll take whatever I can get. If someone's offering me 7 years at this price, great, I'll take it because I may
A
never
lot of
see
that.
this kind of,
Absolutely.
because if I play the bridge deal game and I take way less in this moment in the flat cap just to appease the team and try to give them a chance,
There's no guarantee that there
how
will be
easily am I
money
phased
there.
out when the next guy is available and there's actual
Yep.
space, you know?
Well, right, and there's no guarantee that that money will be there in 2 years because the cap just stayed flat for half a
Sure.
decade.
So that's an immediate that's another immediate reason for it. So
But I
you can't blame them for what they're doing. That's the thing. You can't blame them for
absolutely.
saying we got to wait this thing out because truly, how many true established players do you have that you know are going to be around for the long term? Like Michkov's one of them to an extent because he is by potential, but not by contract status. You're going to get past that ELC and have to do with him whatever it is you decide to do. Travis Konechny got the long-term deal. Travis Sanheim got the long-term deal. Owen Tippett got a long-term deal. And that's really about it. Like, you don't have
Yep.
a lot of long-term deals, and you could have easily looked at Tyson Foerster's season, second in goals, the surge at the end, and said, you know what? This is definitely a guy that at the moment we're building around. And that doesn't mean that they're not. It's just, I think both sides decided it's better to keep seeing what's there than to just dive in head first. And it's almost like, you know, for all the talk that I see, because I see it floated around on social media a lot about they should trade Tippett because of the way the production went down after like this past season and things like that. And everybody's a little sour on him now. There is an element where you look at a deal like this and go, it's almost like they looked at that deal and said, we don't want to sign anybody to some 6-year deal right now. Let's do 2s and 3s and try to bridge things to UFA status and decide whether we're really in this or not.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that meta game shift back. I think teams want shorter term deals
Yeah.
because you don't want to get locked into a bad contract for a long time. Teams or players are seeking shorter deals because, well, younger players are seeking shorter deals because Tyson Foerster expects there to be a lot more dollars available in 2027 when he's up for contract again.
And I think he knows also, like, it's not a secret to know that they have a lot of cap space now. And then as you add more to it, if you're one of the 4 or 5 most important guys on the roster when that time rolls around and they have a lot of money to burn, you're going to reap the benefits if you did your job and go to them and say, hey, listen, I bet on myself. You took a chance on me for the last 2 years to be better. Now I want way more of a commitment in term and way more of a commitment in money. And you should feel comfortable doing it if he delivers to the expectations that you are hopeful for here in the near future.
Absolutely. There's a famous story in the Steve Dangle podcast. Guys tell it a lot, but it's the PK Subban contract story because he essentially did that. He when he was signing out of his ELC with the Montreal Canadiens offered him what it was. I think it ended up being like $3 million a year on a bridge.
Okay.
And PK Subban said, okay, but the next contract's 9. Like I'm telling you right now, it's going to be $9 million. And then he went out and during that bridge deal won a Norris Trophy. So
Right.
he went to Mark Bergevin at the time and said, "I'll take my $9 million, please." And Mark went, "Oh, you were serious about that? Okay, great. Nashville, can we have Shea Weber, please?"
Yeah.
And that's essentially what ended up with that trade happening. And I'm not sitting here saying that Tyson Foerster is PK Subban, although hey, listen, if he breaks out and wins a Selke in the next 2 years, I would take it.
Well,
That being,
I saw the Selke the voting results, and there weren't any Flyers on that list, so they're not there yet.
whoa, crazy. But John Tortorella coaches a defensive anyway.
Well, so I see, and that's the thing. I was a little surprised because I thought Cates playing against some of the best in the league would have at least garnered some, like, the number of players that get the number of players that get a vote is like ridiculous
there's a
to a
lot of
degree.
them.
Like there's a lot of people who get a little something. I actually saw somebody who semi-jokingly, because I think they were also being a little serious about it, but like no, but we're like that it was just and it was a random. It wasn't anybody like that we would like be able to refer to on the show or anything like that. But it was like you love seeing all the local beats who give their guy like a third place vote, you know. Like,
JT Miller has received Selke votes in his career.
well, people asked why Leon Draisaitl was ranked. Like, I think he finished 6th or something. They're like, Draisaitl for the Selke though.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I
Turns
hear
out
you.
when you're good at hockey, you're good at all parts of hockey,
Well, sure,
including
and
defense.
it doesn't hurt when your team is really good and you reap the benefits.
Well, and that's why you don't see any
Gee,
Flyers on that
you're
list.
not gonna tell me it's a coincidence. Alexander Barkov's great. He won the Selke, obviously, and then Sam Reinhart finished 2nd. Gee, I wonder how good their team is at defending, and then having
You know,
offensive talent on the other end.
it turns out you don't need Sergei Bobrovsky when you have just the best defensive forwards in the league.
But it doesn't hurt either.
No, it sure doesn't.
All right, on to
Uh,
the next one.
yes, I was gonna say, did we have anything else about Forrester? Or are we
No, I
okay?
think we're just gonna move on to the next guy.
All right, and this is the contract I was alluding to when we were referring to Jacob Pelletier's next deal. I expect that one to look a lot closer to the contract for
Closer
Helge
to, I think
Grans.
Pelletier is going to be higher because he's got more NHL experience. It'll be
Yeah,
higher in terms of AAV, but
right. But Helge Grans signs another 2-year deal here. It is the league minimum. It's roughly 1.5 million between the 2 years combined.
I think it's like
Uh,
787,000 per year.
yeah,
The first year's a 2-way, and then the second year's a 1-way. So it
yep,
gives you some options for next year that he doesn't have to be on the roster. You have that 2-way ability with him.
yep.
Um, like, this is not only is it not a surprise to me, but I think because I think this is a player they want to see more of, and I think there's a really good chance that he's on the roster at some point early in the season because of the injury to Rasmus Ristolainen. That now
Okay.
you're talking about a right-handed shot defenseman who has some size to his and mobility to his game, and I think that's what they're going to look to him to potentially make some noise in camp. And and of course, like, the funny thing is that we're talking about all these players, right? And even applies to Tyson Foerster because he'll have no experience with this either. But everybody's going to have to adjust to, you're being coached by Rick Tocchet now.
It's a
So what we
whole different ballgame.
saw for, I don't know what the number would be by that point, 72. I think it was 72 games of Tyson Foerster
Yep.
before Brad Shaw took over for the last 9. Then you got the 9 under Bradshaw where he scores 9 goals and somehow gets to 25 when that looked like a pipe dream and
Crazy.
somehow makes it. The same applies to Helge Grans too. It's okay. Helge Grans playing a few games under John Tortorella is not necessarily what it's going to look like when you put Helge Grans in games under Rick Tocchet. So we'll wait and see what happens with
Absolutely.
that. But it's a fair
Yeah.
deal, obviously. It's something to it's obviously it's not a major headline here. I'm not trying to make it out to be like something bigger than what it is. I feel like we're going to have more conversation on some of the next pieces than that. So I don't want to linger on this for too long. It's a good contract for both sides, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is a contract where if you're Danny Briere and Keith Jones and you're looking at your situation, thinking that you might not be changing too much on the back end this summer. If there's not a deal out there to be made, there's not a whole lot of free agents. Like you might roll into camp with pretty close to the same 6 you ended the season with, other than that injury to Rasmus Ristolainen, and you might cost Helge Grans an opportunity to earn that Rasmus Ristolainen spot at least while he's out. I think you can expect to see a lot of him in the preseason. I think there's a reasonable chance he either starts the season on the team or is a pretty quick call up, depending on who else shows up. Uh, it's an opportunity. I think they like Helge Grans a lot. I think you give yourself 2 more years to take a look at him. Obviously, it's a little bit different than Forrester, but it definitely does have some similarities. But, so, moving on from the Helge Grans contract, we have also gotten a little bit of news as far as the coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Tocchet's staff names are starting to swirl around and names are starting to exit the conversation. Um, I don't believe we mentioned it on our last show, but it was announced that Brad Shaw would not be remaining with the Philadelphia Flyers.
We did. I think we did touch on, because
We
we
did
talked.
we did catch that. Okay.
We had said Bradshaw's name at least 3 times, and I finally just jumped in and said, "By the way, I feel like we need to say at least." Okay, so
Mm,
what we didn't
you
know was
did say that.
where he was going. I think we knew that there was going to be a mutual parting of ways there because he didn't ultimately get the job. So it was a little bit difficult to slide back into that assistant role. I think we can safely, like, now I think we need to say the part where he went to the New Jersey Devils staff, which that's quite the jump. You don't
Yep,
like to see a guy
within
like
the
that go
vision,
interdivision, but it happens.
man. And I gotta tell you, if the Devils come out as fraudy as they did last season, Bradshaw might get another interim job this year.
I'm not going to be surprised if Sheldon Keefe
There's
ends up on the hot seat sooner rather than later if their
there's
performance
too much
sours. Yeah,
there's too much talent in New Jersey. They got to hit the gas pedal, and if he's not the guy, they got to figure it out.
sure, and well, then they better stay healthy along the way too, because that's the other part of the equation. So
Or their fronts.
yeah, let's start with this area, because I feel like this is an important part of the conversation at this point, because obviously our last show was dominated by the Rick Tocchet news. He's hired by the Flyers. He wasn't the first coach hired over the course of all this thing. We had plenty of time to go back to Mike Sullivan going to the Rangers, but there was a few more that kind of piled in there before Tocchet was official. Probably the most notable was Joel Quenneville getting back into the coaching game with Anaheim, which was obviously
Yep.
met with mixed reviews.
Yep.
You don't need to be an expert to understand why that's the case.
If Mitch Marner goes to Anaheim, that might end up being one of the most insane decisions I've ever seen out of a player. But anyway.
Sure. So let's add to some of the others, because a lot of these came down rapid fire after, because it was Quenneville. I think Quenneville was the only one who had been hired before Tocchet. Tocchet was hired, and the same day Adam Foote took the Vancouver job. So that was and that was just an assistant going into the head coaching role. They didn't really conduct. I don't want to say they didn't conduct too much of a search. I think it was just that was the parallel move here. It was the easy thing to do.
They promoted their Bradshaw.
Pretty much.
Right.
Because that's also the only reason, there's significance behind Adam Foote taking the Vancouver job, because for a little while people thought maybe Foote would follow Tocchet to Philadelphia. That might be something of interest, with you not bringing back the entire assistant coaching staff. So Tockett's going to have his own staff. There was some thought that might happen. Instead, Foote gets a head coaching job. He goes and he's in Vancouver. Jeff Blashill
Bissonnette's going to end up as a skills coach here, isn't he?
No, I don't think it's going to be that.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I have a name to keep in mind here, just going forward, that you're going to like. I know you're.
I'm mostly kidding, but okay.
No, but I do have a name that you are going to like. That I'm not saying there's anything behind this. I'm just saying I'm reading between the lines of what's. No, it's a wish list, but I'm reading between the lines of what's happening, because this is where we're getting with this. Jeff Blashill got the Chicago job. That was about a week and a half ago, and then just this past weekend, Seattle hired Lane Lambert to be their head coach. So the coaching vacancies keep coming off the board. We're down to 2.
Right.
Boston and Pittsburgh are the only 2 teams left without a coach.
No coaches want to wear black and yellow.
From my understanding, and this is listening to things like 32 Thoughts and things of that nature, the belief is that both of these coaching searches are down to like the final stages, that like by the end of this week you could be hearing of hirings for good. For a little while there was a report out there that Boston had a guy, and I still think that might be the final destination, but it's obviously not official yet. But
Claude Julien again.
No, it was not that.
Oh, okay.
I believe that the names linked the most to Boston, at least at last hearing, were Marco Sturm and Jay Woodcroft. And in Pittsburgh, I believe it's Mitch Love and DJ Smith.
Okay.
So that's interesting, and we'll get into that for a second, why that's interesting, because there's one name I said in there that may or may not get a job. Like this is all up in the air, but may or may not. There, for what it's worth, by the way, the Boston report was like, there was a report that Boston was hiring Sturm. That hasn't officially been the case, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Great hire for them.
I agree. If that's where it goes, I agree. And I do think, I will say this much: whether or not that's exactly what happens or not, I do think Sturm deserves a chance behind an NHL bench. I think he's got great potential.
How long before Dennis Seidenberg's on his coaching staff?
Oh, well, what's he up to?
German, former Bruin, coaching a U13 team.
There you go. I was gonna say, what's he up to? If he's not committed, then sure.
He's coaching a U13 team, so he's only as committed as you can be to a U13 team.
Of course. Now, not to jump the gun on where we're going with these conversations in a little bit, because we will go into the playoffs, but I think there's a slight holding pattern because of what happened in Dallas. There
Yes,
is increasingly more conversation about Pete DeBoer maybe being on thin ice, not
man.
just because he pulled a Vezina quality goalie in an elimination game after 2 shots, 2 goals,
He
but
Patrick
also
Bottom.
the post game comments that really
Yeah,
threw him under the bus. So you have to think about those 2 teams that don't have a coach yet, and the possibility that a third team enters the mix, obviously, and then go, well, what happens if DeBoer makes it to market? I wonder if either of these 2 teams pivots and says, let's go into that conversation. Do they change that up that quickly? It's always possible.
can I tell you? And this is a little more of a broader coaching discussion. Do you know who on the planet was the happiest about that Pete DeBoer meltdown after Game 5?
Who?
Rod Brindamore. Because
Yeah.
if you told me after the respective game threes in those conference finals, hey, which coach is more likely to get fired? I would have been like, oh, it's Rod. Like, it's Rod for sure, 100%. And then Pete DeBoer comes out and does that to
Yeah.
Jake Ottinger.
Yeah.
Oh, in year 1 of 8 of his contract, by the way. Hello.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and
We'll get into the
you're not
board
getting
thing as
rid
we
of
get into the playoffs.
you're not getting rid of a goalie.
Oh,
If this is
no.
what happened, you know what you're doing, and it's not the goalie. It's the most simple part of
This
the
is the
equation.
clearest fire the coach situation I have ever seen in my career. And I just watched the John
Well, it's
Tortorella
very
2024
I was about to say
2025
it's very
Philadelphia
torch-like,
Flyers.
isn't it? It's very
Yeah.
torch-like. You say the wrong thing. Like, I don't think it's a fire like, I really didn't think it was a fireable offense that you necessarily pulled the goalie in that game.
No,
If
absolutely not.
you looked at it strictly as I'm trying to spark my team, that's what I thought was right. I don't think you're being threatened to lose your job, even when we're talking a goalie of Ottinger's quality and in an elimination game. I get all of that. But when you come out there and look at all the other things that were wrong with that team during that series and
Say
say
it's this guy's fault.
this guy's faced Edmonton how many times in the last 2 years, and he's lost like 6 of what 7 of them or whatever. It's like, really? I
First
don't
of all,
think
read
that
the
was the
room,
right
Pete.
right. Like, definitely not the right thing to say 20 minutes after you did handshakes.
Yep.
But so that's one thing. So let's actually get into some names on the Flyer side, because
Yeah.
some of these are
Yeah.
names I haven't mentioned at all, so that makes them probably more readily available. Like, I think somewhere down the line here, Luke Richardson's going to be one of the assistant coaches. I think that is it's been out there. I think it's destined to happen at this point, because
That's a very Flyers hire.
it sure seems like it. I get
Yeah.
it. And then
You're hiring Paul Holmgren.
maybe the other or others, because I'm not sure how Tocchet wants to construct an assistant coaching staff. He may just have 2 guys, he may have 3.
Call
People
Mark
do it.
Recchi,
No, Mark
call
Recchi's not going to be
John
it.
Leclerc,
Mark,
call Eric Desjardins. Just call that whole 2009,
well,
2000 or 1999, 2000
okay,
team.
so hold on. Leclerc's already got a job. I don't think you got to worry about that. Recchi, actually, there was reports, because there was a lot of, I alluded to this on our last show about how if you thought that Tocchet was hitting the former Flyer thing,
Mm-hmm.
wait until you see the assistant coaching staff of Luke Richardson and Mark Recchi. But Recchi reportedly
Hi.
did not want to coach. He is enjoying the ambassador role, which you can admire, because
Fair enough. You
there's
don't ever
nothing
have to put a pair of skates on if you don't want to. Right.
there is nothing wrong with former players coming back and saying, I'm just here to shake hands with people. I
I'm here
enjoy
to
that
hang
part of
out
it.
in the press box and go meet fans.
And
I'm cool with that.
maybe on the slightest end be an advisor, which means that, like, yeah, we can converse from time to time, but it doesn't really mean
Sure.
too much in the long run, right? But
Sure. Hey, what do you think about this? Oh, I think this. Oh,
sure.
okay.
Right. It's just for bouncing stuff off the walls, essentially.
Yeah.
So now the funny part is that that's not where I stopped with former Flyer references of that exact era that you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
But it's a more obscure one. It's not going to be somebody that you're going to remember as a longtime guy. He basically had a cup of coffee in Philadelphia.
I guarantee you're about to name my favorite player from whatever team he was on. So I love the niche guys.
All right. So I'm wondering if Adam Oates is an option,
Man.
because
Okay. Yeah,
let's say
he's been
I
doing coaching
tried.
stuff for a while.
He hasn't. I
Yeah.
tried to do is I went back and I tried to look at Tocchet's former assistant coaches at every stop. Oates was
Okay.
one of them way back
Oates was
when. I
in
think
Arizona, right?
no, I think it was in Tampa.
Oh, it would have been in Tampa. Yeah.
because
Wow.
it was before Oates was even a head coach for a brief period of time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's an interest there per se, but it struck me as a name that's out that would be available. Let's just put it that
And
way.
and if you are a guy who wants to work your way back in the door, this is the way you do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now I'm not sure how many former defensemen in the NHL you want to have on your staff, but Phil Housley was at one point in time on Tocchet's staff. He did just
Sure.
get released from the Rangers, so food for thought there. You know the guy's available.
Yep.
One of the other names, John McClain, just got let go from the Islanders when they made their not coaching change. Patrick Waugh is still the head coach of the Islanders, but they basically are going to
The
revamp the
management
entire.
changes. Yeah.
But no, they're going to basically revamp the entire assistant coaching staff. They got rid of 2 assistants and the whole minor league staff.
Which
So
means that they're basically revamping all of hockey ops around Patrick
Patrick
Waugh.
Waugh, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Which is an insane decision, but okay.
But McClain was also on a coaching staff with Tocchet in the past. So now that he's available, I wonder if a call goes out there. And here comes the name that I think you're going to like, because at least for right now, there's the job in Boston.
If you tell me Eric Desjardins coming as an assistant coach,
no, because it's not. You're going to love this name because it is not a Flyer connection whatsoever.
Okay, even better. Great.
But if Boston's got an opening and Pittsburgh's got an opening and they hire, if Boston hires Marco Sturm and Pittsburgh hires whoever among the two that I told you, Mitchell Lover, DJ Smith, I would be picking up the phone immediately and calling Jay Woodcroft.
Oh, yeah.
And asking, do you want to be part of this staff?
Just do anything, please. Just show up sometimes and chit chat with Rick Tocchet. I don't even care what you talk about. You can bring him coffee.
And I think that, because there's a lot of coaches out there that do this, that bring on a guy that has a little experience in some capacity, and I don't want to say the wrong thing for this coaching staff, so I'm going to look it up before I say it, but I want to make sure that I have that right with who their entire coaching staff is before I say it. But I believe in Edmonton this is the case, that they have, because everybody knows who the head coach in Edmonton is. It's Chris Knobloch, right?
Right.
Of course. And you're talking about a
Oh, I remember that he brought people in when he first got that job.
Yes, that's why I'm trying to make sure I have the right guy, because I believe, is he an assistant still? Yes. Okay. So Glenn Gullison's on Chris Knobloch's staff. Makes total sense, does it not? That you have a guy that he's not necessarily, maybe you don't even think he's head coaching material after he was a head coach, but he's got that experience, and you take the step back and you say, be an assistant coach, be believe it or not, to an extent, Tocchet did that. Tocchet had 2 years in Tampa and then said, okay, yeah, Pittsburgh sounds great. Mike Sullivan, I'll be on your staff. And then they won 2 Stanley Cups out of it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's a decision that Rick Tocchet made so much as a decision
Mario told him
that fell to Rick Tocchet. Well, I just mean in terms of, I don't think he left Tampa and decided to be an assistant coach somewhere. I think
he was out of coaching for 3 years before it happened.
Right, and I think the rest of the league went, okay, you can take an assistant job.
Well, and in fairness, like I just said, what do you think happens there? Mario calls and says, "Hey, do you want to do something for this team?"
Absolutely, and I know we mentioned it on last show when we talked about Rick Tocchet getting hired, but I think the thing that I'm most excited about having him as the coach of the Philadelphia Flyers is his relationship with his superstars.
Sure.
And I'm excited to see that develop. But and sorry, you mentioned Pittsburgh, and that's the first thing that jumps to mind, because he was the Geno Whisperer and the Phil Kessel Whisperer, and
well, they're not getting any of those guys anytime soon. But I get your point. But no,
you know what I mean.
But I'm genuinely curious that if for some reason, because I'm kind of surprised at this point that we've gotten this far with 2 teams left, and even now it doesn't sound like Jay Woodcroft is getting one of those jobs either. He's not
call him at least.
Well, he's not even mentioned when people talk about the Pittsburgh job, and then he was mentioned with the Boston job, but I really think they're leaning Sturm. And if that's the case and he's available, hey, listen, he came to your training camp last year for observation. He knows what the facility's like. He's got an idea of how everything is, who he would be working with. I would say give him a call and see what you can't see, knowing full well that if it goes well, that he's probably going to another job at some point 2 years from now, but
Well, I was gonna say, I think Jay Woodcroft is a prime candidate for, hey man, you can hire him, but he might be gone by late November because somebody else called and offered him a
sure.
big
And
job.
well, and here's the interesting part then, because I'm going to bring up the Phantoms thing because okay, one of the pieces of news we have from the last show, Ian LaPerriere is no longer going to be the coach of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. He got basically moved to an advisory role in his own right, which basically
Take it
just runs out.
upstairs.
Well, it runs out his contract because I think he had one more year left on his contract to coach the Phantoms,
Take
and
it
now it's
upstairs.
so here's another interesting name because okay, the reason why I'm kind of interested in Woodcroft here for a second with the assistant coach thing is because he did reportedly get some sort of a contact interview, whatever the case was. I think Friedman had said that like yeah, Tocchet was always high
Here,
on the
right?
list.
Philadelphia?
Right. Yeah, that Tocchet was always at the top of the list, but like Woodcroft was considered and things like that. Like
Yeah,
he could
I'm
actually
not
float that.
surprised.
So I kind of keep that link in place that it's like, hey, listen, if nobody else hires this guy and you talk to as like if Danny Briere sits there and goes to Rick Tocchet and says, we looked into this guy, we really like him. I don't know how you feel about him, but if you're interested in this, we should contact him if nobody else hired him.
Yeah.
Looking for assistant coaches. Another name that was supposedly out there for the head coaching search for the Flyers may be your Phantoms head coaching option because Jay
Okay.
McKee's name came back up again.
I'm fine with that. If he's willing to take an AHL job,
Well, it's
I'm okay
see
with
for
that.
him that's jumping the coaching ladder because he's coaching in the OHL. So you jump
Yeah.
from juniors to the pros. You get a
Yeah.
chance to coach behind a professional bench. He sounds like the guy that you would have waiting. Like if you did get Woodcroft for your NHL staff and know he's gone in maybe 2 years time because somebody else wants a head coach. Jay McKee sounds like the guy who you groom for a couple of
Slot in
years at the
there.
minor league level and then say, yeah, a la Craig Berube.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the minors for a few years. Oh, wait, Peter Laviolette needs another assistant coach. You're coming up.
What Ian LaPerriere was supposed to be.
Yeah, if they would have done it in reverse, I get that.
Man,
Instead of him
well,
put,
we all thought Ian LaPerriere was gonna get heavily interviewed for this job at some point. I think it was the Vigneault hire.
yeah, well, and he was on the assistant coaching staff and stayed
Mm-hmm.
around things like. But
Yeah,
anyway,
but
so
yeah.
so McKee's out there, and then they also are interviewing John Snowden, who's already an assistant there. That's it feels like right now anyway. One of those two is most likely. You never know if there's any other crazy things out there, but you know, I wouldn't be shocked if they try to talk Jay McKee into jumping from juniors to the AHL and seeing where that can go. So
Absolutely,
it's
and we talked about it last show. If we're looking at roughly a 3-year window here, maybe even a little bit less, and if Tockett's not your guy, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of a look at McKee.
sure. Especially if he's, if you can try to find that next guy who's like the up and comer from juniors, like
Yep.
look, maybe you did what you did because look, Rick Tocchet as your head coach does a lot of things. You brought up the superstar element where good relationships with superstars. There's name recognition in the NHL. There's recognition within the Flyers organization, so it appeals to obviously more than some, but appeals to certain portions of the fan base more than others.
Mm-hmm.
It appeals to hopefully free agents. That was something that was a big part of it. Like if that's what gets the ball rolling and you also can somewhere in the course of the offseason, especially if the goal, like, because obviously here's what the goal of this whole thing is. You don't just say, thank you, Ian LaPerriere, we're moving on, we're doing something different just because you made it's not just because you made a coaching change at the top. It's not only did you make the coaching change, but now you need to bring somebody in that they're going to be lockstep with how this is run. Like the way they play in Lehigh Valley is the way that they play in Philadelphia.
Right. This is, even though they've been here almost 2 years now, this is Danny and Keith's first real overhaul of the coaching staffs,
Right.
right? Like John Tortorella was the main central figure in that locker room the last 2 years and on the coaching staff in general.
Mm-hmm.
And you clean him out, and Danny Briere and Jones get a look, and they get their guy in there, and
Yep.
they clean it out, top to bottom. You got a new AHL coach, you got a new NHL coach, you got a whole new NHL bench. Okay,
Exactly.
here you go. You have the keys. Yep.
So that's pretty much where that's like, I wouldn't be surprised if toward the end of the week you're hearing more about like what's firm on that and what's not. Like, it's getting to that territory because I think they're gonna have to like, you're in the territory where you're gonna have most of this stuff figured out pretty close to the draft. So, now that we're about to enter the Cup Final and all that type of stuff, you don't want to be trying to figure out more.
Right. You want to
Or
have
as you
all
get
your
closer, you want to know
you
everything. You want to know
right.
what
You want
your team
to
looks like.
right. You want to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed as far ahead of the draft and free agency as you can.
Exactly. So that's where things stand for now. We'll see where it goes. I think that, like, let's put it this way. I don't think they're naming any assistant coaches or even, well, maybe they can jump to the Phantoms head coach sooner because I don't think they have to worry as much about who their candidates are there.
Mm.
But I really think that there's a reason why you're not hearing assistant coaching hires yet, and it's not because they're sitting here taking their grand old time deciding who they want necessarily for it to be. I think they're waiting to see, okay, Boston's done, Pittsburgh's done. That's it. There's nobody else at the moment, so let's start like, maybe we can contact people who can be part of this thing. If they truly didn't get the job that they were, because most of these guys were, I mean, and we can't forget, like I said this, like what I said about Jay Woodcroft, that's having a former head coach on your staff. Luke Richardson was too. So you're bringing in guys. It starts to feel, and you have to be careful with this because this didn't necessarily work when the Flyers tried it, however many years ago, 4 or 5, 5, 6 years ago at this point. But Alain Vigneault's staff was a bunch of ex NHL head coaches. Essentially,
So
it's hey, here's Michel Terry and here's Mike Yeo,
here's
and
Mike Yeo. Yep.
now, I mean, interestingly enough, and Mike Yeo is on another staff now after all of this, but for a little while he was on Tocchet's staff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you just had that thought on your mind for a split second, like, would he come back? He didn't seem like he hated it, so now obviously he seems locked in Ottawa, and that team's a playoff team and all that stuff like that, and
He's the guy. Yep.
so there's not really much to go off of with that. So all right,
Well, yeah, you mentioned two vacancies, and that's Pittsburgh and Boston.
yeah,
I'm going to use this as a little bit of a transition here, but that is, of course, unless Pete DeBoer gets fired, there may be a third coaching vacancy coming up because, man, I know we touched on it briefly earlier, but we'll get into that here as we move into our playoff discussion. So,
yeah. Well, we have a couple more things on the Flyers
oh, we
side
do,
first.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so because I wanted to jump into this first and foremost. It's been
Oh, right.
it's been a hot topic. Listen, I think we're at the point in the off season slash, playoffs, however you want to look at it, where things
Season, yeah.
where things get a little boring. There's only 2 teams left playing. The Stanley Cup
Yep.
Final is going to take 2 weeks to play, even if it's just a sweep.
Yep. Yep. Because we have the 2 travel days in
I'm joking.
between games 2
I'm
and
partially
3.
joking, but I'm not. So, but
Right.
there's a lot of downtime. So the rumors that are out right now about Marco Rossi serve 2 purposes.
Mhm.
One is from a team perspective, where this just helps plant different things that executives use to their advantage. The asking price for a player's next contract, the possibility of a trade. We hear so much about posturing, and this could definitely be a case of just that.
Mhm.
Here's just this information. The other purpose though is to get people talking, and mission accomplished. People are talking. If it was as simple as what is out there, which was that the Flyers could trade a late first round pick, I assume, for Rossi's rights, and then the contract that Rossi wants is a 7-year deal at $7 million AAV, like, then yeah, of course, if that's all that there is to it, if it's quite literally surface level, then yes, do that. Like,
Correct.
you need centers. This is a 23-year-old center. You'd lock him up for his prime years. 7 million AAV sounds very reasonable as you go into the cap increase, and hopefully him turning from a 24 goal, 60-point guy to more than that, and being at least
Even if he's only a 30 goal, 70-point guy on your second line
even if he's
center.
right, even if he's a capable 2C at best, like,
Yep.
you're so lacking centers, it's still something that you should do. But I know better at this time of year. You know better at this time of year that the countdown is on. We're less than a month away from free agency. The draft is going to hit during that time. Trade talk happens. Like, I expect this kind of conversation to start heavily as things move towards the next big dates in the offseason, and just try to drum up conversation. And I look, I think the reason people are a little bit infatuated with Rossi more than others is, okay, there's not a lot of noise around a lot of the other RFA centers that are out there, probably because most teams or most people are thinking, okay, Winnipeg may have some trouble with this, but Gabe Vilardi, you never know what the number's going to be. Maybe, Winnipeg's got everything, right? It feels like they do. They've got a really good defenseman that leads the core there. They've got the goalie. They've got game-changing forwards.
Won the President's Trophy.
Right. Do you think
Yeah.
because of that, do you think like maybe I should take less money and try to be on a team that I think really can win something soon? Like, maybe that's the approach, and maybe Winnipeg's not afraid of that because they know what
Yeah, but
until
if I'm
somebody throws out an offer sheet.
well, right, and if I'm as good as Gabe Vilardi is, I'm going, "Man, how much is the cap going up next year?"
Well,
Okay,
sure.
I want like most of that because I've earned a lot of that.
Sure. And well, and that's the other thing. Like, you have to ask yourself from the Flyers' perspective, is Velarde worth whatever the comp is going to be? Is it worth, on the in the early, is it worth a first, second, and third? Is it worth more than that? Like, if you're going to do that, you better, I've said it before, you better be right about those decisions.
I think the answer to those questions, by the way, in order, are yes and no. Is it worth that? Yes. Is it worth more than that? No.
Okay, so you would do the money amount that gives up a first, second, and third next
For
year.
if I'm getting at least 6 years of Vilardi, 5 or 6 years, yeah, I would do that.
I would imagine that you're getting 7 years, honestly.
Well,
So,
I'm hoping, of course, but I'm willing to do it for 6.
and then Mason McTavish is another name that would be out there for it. But the reason I think you're not hearing about him is because I think they're just going to
Anaheim
match.
matches whatever they want.
Right.
Yeah.
Anaheim's got the money to do it. So Minnesota's in a situation right now where here's this player that, okay, and I know Bill Guerin said he's not dying to trade him, but he's also not shying away from the possibility. Let's just be clear about that. This is a guy you bumped from first and second line minutes during different parts of the seasons, depending on who was in, who was out. Like, they had injuries galore at different points. So he played an elevated role. And in the playoffs, he's on the fourth line. And then at the end of the playoffs is saying, I know I'm more than that, so I'm not sure what the future holds. Like, it's all setting up for something to happen here. Maybe it just goes down the offer sheet path because it's got the real potential to do that.
Mhm.
Maybe it doesn't at all, and it just becomes a trade situation. There's two reasons why you wouldn't trade a late first for Rossi here. One is that you're going to run into issues once you get the rights to make the deal happen, that you wouldn't want to give up one of your firsts for essentially what turns into nothing because you're having to move something again, or that you have that whatever first it may be, whether it's 22 or what will eventually be 31 or
31 or
32,
32. Right.
that you already have in your mind, or have had discussions, for all I know, about something else that will cost you that and more. And well, and that's what the case is here too, to a degree. Like, it wasn't as cut and dry as, here's a first round pick, give us the rights. It was going to be more than that. So I don't get too obsessed with this type of stuff. I can't, because it would be exhausting. It's exhausting
Fair
to try
enough.
to sit there and work in hypotheticals about stuff that's not necessarily factual. I don't even know, like seriously, I can't see, with their need for centers, Danny Briere saying, "Oh yeah, that's all it costs, is a first that might be 31st overall. Give me his rights, and then I'll talk about the contract." I can't see how you
Well,
would do that. So I don't think that that's really the truth. I think it's what someone's trying to tell people to get some conversation going to build towards something else.
yeah, this is the time of year when agents earn their paychecks because there's constant information out there. There's information, misinformation, disinformation, all of the above.
All the above,
Uh,
exactly.
another point on Minnesota that I wanted to mention, they have almost $16 million in cap space this summer. So, and I know there's more involved in that because Juracek is also an RFA next year, and so is Kaprizov. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
have big deals coming, but they also have time and an
Sure.
accelerating cap. So it is not impossible that Rossi signs an offer sheet, and Minnesota just matches it. That
It's
is
always
also not
possible.
impossible.
Sure, it's always
Right.
possible.
I just wanted
It's
to mention it. Like, they're not nearly as cap strapped as a team
but
like
it's
Winnipeg
no,
is.
but it's the same conversation as the Mitch Marner stuff we had. Like, it's not taking away. Like, everybody's excited about the possibility of somebody being available.
Yeah.
What did you say to me right before we started? Hey, maybe we need to mention the other guy whose name is now floating right out there, because all of a sudden Dallas loses a series and it's like, hey, we're going to change up the whole thing, right?
Well, yeah, and I think we have to get into our playoff
No, I know,
conversation
but
before
like,
we transition into that.
my
Yeah, no, I
point
agree.
is, like, I'll hint at it. Like, I don't mind hinting at the guy who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Jason Robertson's name came up,
Yep.
and it's like, as soon as you bring an all-star quality player who may now be on the move,
You
and
have to consider it.
would probably be the best player on your team. I mean, I don't know about
Oh yeah.
Rossi might not be the best player on your team. He's probably somewhere right in that top 3.
Jason Robertson walks into this locker room, and instantly his only peer is Matvei Mishkov, and
Well, right.
probably not even right
Sure.
away.
See, and that's what I'm
Right.
saying. Marner's the best player on this team today. Robertson's
Yep.
the best player on this team today. But
Right. Rossi is
Rossi is
a
probably top
good
3.
guy to add to the group. Right.
I'd say top 3. Like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be signing him to be a 2C. If he eventually became one, that's great. But you wouldn't be signing him like that because you don't
You
have
wouldn't be signing
anybody
him
who comes
as a
close.
right.
Like, he'd
Exactly.
have to play top minutes just because. And then who knows? Do you stick him between Michkov and blank? Maybe it's just
Konechny?
Travis. Well, maybe it's just Travis Konechny. Maybe it's something else that we don't even see coming right now.
Maybe it's on Tippett.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Maybe it is. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah,
But
we
either
would say
way,
there's plenty to
it
we have
doesn't.
no
But it,
idea what
but it
Rick
doesn't.
Tochet's gonna
But my
do.
point is, it doesn't matter. Like, okay, guess what? Like, same thing happened with Ottinger, right? Ottinger
Yep.
gets pulled. Oh, there's turmoil. Maybe, if they decide on the coach over the goalie, should they trade for, like, because right now in Philadelphia, you'll do anything to get the high end piece that you lack. So if you hear of, if even the slightest hint of, hey, maybe it's possible that there's something wrong with this situation, you go, like, you're in go for it mode.
If Dallas decides to if Dallas picks Pete DeBoer over every player on their roster,
I know.
I have no idea. But okay, anyway.
Well,
Um,
if they do, I'm so off of the, hey, that's the best constructed team in the league.
correct.
Like,
It's
nope,
over.
don't feel that way. So really
Nope.
quickly, because I know we want to get to playoffs, really quickly before
Yeah,
we
yeah.
do, one last final shout out, because some congratulations are in order for 2 Flyers prospects. Denver Barkey and Oliver Bonk won the Memorial Cup with the London Knights.
Absolutely. The London
Are
Knights
we surprised?
finish. No, they finished just an incredibly dominant season. What did they go 15-1 during the OHL playoffs? Something
No,
like
you got to
that.
win. I think you've got to win 16. So it was 17
Oh, is
games.
it?
They went 16-1.
I thought their first round was best of 5, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think
Okay.
it was still best of 7.
But either way, they almost went undefeated through the playoffs, which is insane no matter
And then
what
they
league you're
lost
in.
one game in the Memorial Cup.
Yep.
And which basically just set them up to have to play one extra game that they won. Like, they won anyway to get to the final, and then they dominated the final. Now listen, because they played Medicine Hat in the final. Gavin McKenna's really good. Don't get me wrong. Like,
Oh yeah.
he's incredible. That was the well-oiled machine. Like in my head, because I always have to, like, especially for the station, I kind of have to try to create comparisons for people who may not watch hockey on the regular, like, especially like junior level, right? Like, junior hockey is something that, like, people like us would pay attention to, and not everybody's going to, right? And it hit me, like, but I don't know what made me think of this. Maybe it was because I was looking at something that involved the Eagles or something like that. And my immediate thought was, if you had to explain it to a football fan and say, let me tell you about the London Knights, it's pick any SEC team. It's the Georgia Bulldogs. It's
It's
the
the Georgia
Alabama Crimson
Bulldogs.
Tide. It's
Yeah.
Georgia. It's Alabama. And you wonder what, like, and you sit there and you wonder, why do the Eagles keep going back to Georgia and Alabama for their players? Well, because all the players that come out of it are pro ready.
If you are listening to this show somehow and you are a college football fan but not a hockey fan, the London Knights are the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs.
Kind of. Yeah.
That's
No,
it, man.
well, and you know what made me really think of that too? Oliver Monk was a first round pick. So
Yep.
what, and you go through that roster. So was Sam Dickinson. So was Easton Cowan. These are the guys who were like the stars of the team, or typically the stars of the team that you go, hey, they're going to make they should be taking a huge step next level because there's so much potential there. And you think about guys who came through London otherwise, right? Matthew Tkachuk and Mitch Marner, and where did those guys get drafted? They're all top 10 because
Yep.
that's just how it goes, right? Like there's always superstars everywhere. And then you get a guy like Denver Barkey, who's like the guy from Georgia that you pick in the 4th round of the NFL draft, who turns into something really valuable for your team also because he's got that pedigree.
Denver Barkey has everything that Howie Roseman looks for in a player.
Oh yeah, and Barkey is going to
Right?
be like I can't wait to. He's a guy. He's probably the guy I can't wait to watch most go pro next year.
I agree.
For the sake of, we're all kind of not sure how this is going to translate completely. He's got great offensive chops in juniors. We know that, but what's it going to be like when you're not playing against other junior level guys and
You're not playing against 15-year-olds,
right, and
respectfully.
you're 5'10" and 170 pounds. Like
Sure, and especially because he is going to have to cut his teeth in the AHL more than likely, which
right,
is a more physical, heavier league that has some older players in it, and it's a hard league to make it through as a young player, as a
sure.
rookie.
And that's why
Uh,
I just want to see what the numbers look like because like I think the offense can translate. I don't know how much, but like I get the sense that he's got the ability, like long term down the road, middle 6 and plays like to 50 to 60 point potential, and turns into every bit of like and I'm talking about from a personality because he's like so, I had somebody send me something on Twitter X about comparing him a little bit, like could he be like Mike Richards? Physically, no. Like style of play wise, no, because I don't see that much physicality from Barkey. But do I see the possible point production there? Possibly. Like I don't know if he's going to be as much of a goal scorer as Richards was, but point production wise, I could see it.
I'm hoping. Obviously, this is a pretty high bar, and I do know that. I'm hoping he could be like a Braden Point type player.
And to me, like the thing is that like I
Yeah,
hope so too. By the way, I would
yeah. Of
say
course. Why wouldn't you? Hey, would you like Braden Point on your team?
like
Yep,
there's
sure would.
he's he's got an engine on him that makes you immediately like an engine and kind of this involvement in the game that makes you immediately think of Brad Marchand. Like
Okay.
he wants to be engaged in everything. He seems like he's going to be a chirper. He seems like everything. So there's also an element where he's kind of Travis Konechny light and
Yeah,
just like
maybe a little Scott Lawton in there too.
Lawton had a little bit more physicality to his
Of
game than Barkey
course,
does. I
right.
think. Like I'm
I'm
not
talking
saying
more about
Konechny
the
doesn't,
edge
but
on
like
it.
no, I know. Like, I think he's a pot stirrer, is what I mean. I don't think he's
Okay.
as physical, but I think he's going to be the guy who wants to chirp people and really be
Listen, I
energetic.
love that.
And
I
that's why I
love
said
that.
I think he's Konechny light. Like, I think
Yep.
that's what you're gonna, you think of that. Like, how many years in the league would that have been for Konechny when they did the outdoor game mic'd up?
Oh
That
yeah.
was what 4 years in
Not
the league, and he
something
is
like
just
that.
chirping away. Like he's not even close to being in the leadership group just yet because you've got
Right. He's chirping Evgeny Malkin of all people.
right, but I'm saying like he's not close to the
Right.
leadership group yet because Claude
Right.
Giroux's still here, Jake Voracek's still here, Wayne Simmons is playing in his
Uh,
last game as a Flyer,
oh
and you've got
God, my
all
heart
that stuff.
just
I know,
tore in half.
and you've got all that stuff going on, and this is eventually going to be one of your leaders. But in the moment, he's just as involved as anybody in chirping
Yeah.
away at whatever's going on. So like exactly, I sense
And
that.
and if he reaches his ceiling and turns out to be what he is, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like he's a menace of a 3C in a playoff series.
Possibly, I don't see, and that's the thing. I wonder if we stick to that. I wonder if we find out in 2 years' time, hey, he's not really as much of a center as we thought. He's probably more of
Stick
a
him on the
winger.
wing. Yeah.
I could see it. I
Yeah.
mean, they kind of did that
Absolutely.
already in London. He was playing wing a lot. So
Okay.
now
So
don't
he
get me
may end up being a winger
now
at the
don't get me
NHL
wrong.
level.
Now don't get me wrong. Watching the Memorial Cup final, you love seeing that he gets 2 goals and scores 2 goals kind of in different ways. Has a bit of a shot, uses a screen, gets a breakaway, scores on a nice backhand. Two just great celebrate. Like you see the way
By the
he
way,
celebrates.
captain of the London Knights. Like we talk about them being the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs, and they put the C on him.
See that too, because that was, and see that's the
Yep.
interesting part, because that's the thing I think about with the Richards comparison is like, no, is he going to play like Mike Richards? Probably not. But do you know what I do think matters a lot? People loved Mike Richards, the leader, as a captain.
Right.
it says a lot that you play for a franchise like that in junior hockey. That's probably there's probably no more prolific junior hockey franchise out there right now. And you get named the captain over a bunch of guys who got picked in the first round. You're the mid-round pick. And it says a lot that you've earned that, and your
So
teammates think you've earned that.
it says a lot about what you mean to that room, and that is
Sure.
very, very good. But
All right, we
okay,
should get
well,
to the playoffs.
hopefully that is not the last Cup Barkey and Bonk win, but it's the last
Have a
one
lot
they're
of time
winning
for
for
that.
now, and that second one will probably take a little bit of time here.
All right, so why don't we jump into the conference finals first and just touch
Yeah,
on what we saw and then go into the next. So
ab- absolutely. Yeah. In the meantime, we do have the 2025 Stanley Cup to talk about, which the Flyers won't be winning, but yeah, maybe next year.
yeah, we knew that. Well,
Um,
we knew that for a while that they
yeah.
weren't going to be winning that.
All right. So we're starting in the Eastern Conference here, and
Yeah,
man, if you pay any attention to hockey at all, you know that this next couple of segments here are about to be real poor, and I apologize, but
it's
unfortunately,
a
they were
reflection of
just
the reflection of the
not
series.
they were not fun. Man,
No,
none of these series were fun. This listen, neither series was particularly fun, but at least the other series has Connor McDavid in it. This was just a nightmare. This was just the Florida
I
Panthers absolutely whooping the snot out of the Carolina Hurricanes for the better part of
yeah,
5 games.
I expected so much better.
I
And
agree.
and the sad part is like I don't even care that Carolina won a game in game 4. The first 3 games were so lopsided you were waiting for game 5 to be what it was. And actually in
Yep.
game 5, it looks like it's going to go the other way for a little while. Carolina's doing what they need to do to try to get that series to 6, and then oh yeah, sorry, here come the Florida Panthers.
Yeah,
And
it
it was
turns out
just one disaster after another in this thing too. Like the goaltending situation was a mess because they went from Anderson to Kochetkov and then
yep.
back again, and defensively they were atrocious. Carolina was, and Florida just has that win. Like it's interesting because I got asked from from a producer at the station a very interesting question. This ties into obviously like where Florida is at because this is Florida's 3rd straight Stanley Cup Final appearance, and I got asked basically what's the most or like here's a list, which potential run is more impressive, the current Florida Panthers run 23 to 25, the
Really?
2020 to 22 Tampa Bay Lightning,
It's a
the
real
20
good one.
the 2010 to 2015 Chicago Blackhawks, or
Well,
the 2000 to 2003 New Jersey Devils. Now, I kind of very quickly, because I even said, now here's what I said. It's a great question. It's a difficult question. I immediately nixed the 2000 to 2003 Devils because no salary cap. Thank you for playing.
fair enough.
Like to me, doing any of this in the salary cap era is is infinitely more impressive. And then like I started to think about it. I'm like, I think I lean toward the Panthers because they didn't build this the same way as everybody else did. The Blackhawks did, the Blackhawks got top draft picks. They got Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves, and all of a sudden had their core at forward, you know, and along the way drafted and developed a lot of what else was on that roster, right? Like you're thinking the Duncan Keiths, the Brent Seabrooks. You go through that entire thing, you end up with different pieces of it. Makes total sense. Tampa basically did the same thing over a longer period of time, but they did because you go as far back as Stamkos, Hedman,
Stamkos, yeah.
and Vasilevsky, and then the finds that you had in Point, and Kucherov was a second rounder, and
And then all the
you
depth
know,
work you did with the Gourds and the Palots and the
right.
everybody, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Yanni Gord signed an extension with Tampa today.
The most Tampa Bay Lightning extension I have
I know,
ever seen in my life. Was it
but
6
still, like,
years, 2.333 per?
but
Something
still,
like
like,
that?
yeah, I know, but still, like, it's draft built. It's mostly draft built over several years. I
And
don't think
then
we've, I don't
I
think we've
gotta
seen a
say,
team.
Florida was built, not built. I think the things that took the Florida Panthers into the next level were the Matthew Tkachuk trade and the hiring of Paul Maurice.
I do like. You know what? Here's the thing. I like that you brought up the hiring of Paul Maurice. That is a big deal. I think that you know what I said about the Flyers and how you're at a stage now where you've got to get everything right. That's what the Florida Panthers have done. It's
They did.
every
Yep.
decision you're making is right. Yes, that Matthew Tkachuk trade is a big one in this thing. Of course it is. But you also traded for Sam Reinhart and you signed Carter Verhaeghe straight off of Tampa's roster to be part of your own. And you traded for Sam Bennett and you traded for, insert name hero over of course. You signed a gigantic contract with Sergei Bobrovsky when you were ready for that. You grabbed Gustav Forsling off of waivers. And then think about it. Here's what I mean by making all the right decisions. You have Forsling and you had Brandon Montour on a cup team last year. And when the offseason rolled around, you had to pick one. And you picked the right one because
Absolutely did.
Montour went off and played in Seattle and was out of the playoffs with, what do they have, the 7th overall pick or something?
Right by January. Right.
And Forsling looks like one of the biggest, just like one of the biggest success stories for, hey, by the way, that guy who gets put on waivers and like looks like his career is dead in the water. Just put him on the right roster with the right players around him and the right coaching staff around him, and look what happens. Like,
Yeah, man. And the Florida Panthers were heavily criticized if you go back to the Vegas expansion
sure.
draft,
Well, yeah,
right?
because of
You lose
Marchessault and
Marcia and
Smith.
Riley Smith, and then they go to the Stanley Cup Final that first year with the Vegas Golden Knights. And
But
now, obviously, Marchessault has been a player, and Riley Smith has kind of faded a little bit. But I mean, you got
think
rid
about
of those guys, and that created room for
sure.
other guys to come up, and they've done a great job in Florida.
And think about the decisions they've made this year that replace guys from last year. Like, I'm not even just talking about the Montour one at this point, but like Oliver Ekman-Larsson was on the Panthers last season. He goes to Toronto. When it comes time to get another defenseman, what do? Make a trade for Seth Jones. Because you in your head know, yeah, it's a lot of
No.
money, but that guy's going to help us because he's going to fit right in here.
Because you, in your head, know that Aaron Ekblad's going to get suspended next week. But
Well,
hey, whatever.
sure, I hear you there.
You put on the
Okay,
tinfoil hat. But hey,
let's do others. Last year on your team, you had Vladimir Tarasenko. This year you don't. He signed somewhere else, and when you need another forward, you send a second round draft pick to Boston for Brad Marchand.
Mm-hmm.
And add that veteran presence, and that's your Tarasenko, right? That's your
Absolutely.
veteran. Like, you filled every gap perfectly.
Yep.
To the point where you didn't even need to worry about like Spencer Knight off to Chicago. Yeah, I know, no backup anymore. We're gonna have to get another guy who's backing up. It doesn't matter. We got Sergei
You only play
Bobrovsky.
one, right? You only play one goalie in the playoffs anyway. Who cares?
No,
No, my biggest
unless you're every other team that was left in the Final
well,
Four.
my biggest ill on the Florida Panthers is they couldn't just do it when Claude was there. What's wrong with you? But think about you
Wrong
want to
place,
talk
wrong time all the time, though, right?
you want to talk butterfly effects in NHL history. This Florida Panthers team was down 3-1 to the best Boston Bruins team of all time.
Yep.
As far as regular season record goes, the best NHL team of all time as far as regular season records go. They were
It's
down 3-1 to that team and fully on the ropes.
it's hysterical to me how many times I've seen the clip now because it comes up all the time. Brad Marchand's got the series on his stick and gets stopped on a breakaway by Bobrovsky, and it turns into they win game 5, they win game 6, they win game 7, and then they're off on a magical run until they're in the Stanley Cup Final and lose to a team that was way more prepared for that situation in Vegas, and then their time
But
came.
Yeah, but if they just go out in 5 that year, who knows what happens? They might trade major pieces. They might not
Right.
feel comfortable adding Tarasenko the following year.
Sure.
Like, there's all these things that they might look at the Claude Giroux trade and go, that was a swing and a miss. We went out in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as far as butterfly effects in hockey history go, that is absolutely
But
up there.
that's why it's so impressive to me because I look at it and I go, you got 2 guys that you drafted essentially. Like I know there's more on the roster, but you've got 2 guys, Barkov and Ekblad. And then the rest of the team is you made this trade here, you made this trade there, you acquired this guy, you found a way, you signed this guy, you claimed this guy off of waivers, do whatever. It's just that's what's astounding to me. And then I brought up going into one of the previous series that for them to even get back to this stage, it involved, the guys who didn't play as many minutes last year or for parts of this year that you're going to need them. and Anton Lundell looks great this year, and you're Louis Dorinen looks great, and you've got Samaskevich is starting to come into his own a little bit more and more, and it just keeps
What if
getting more and more impressive.
absolutely? What have I said with every Florida Panther season this postseason, or every Florida Panther series this postseason? What has my prediction been, and what has my reasoning been behind it?
For Florida,
Yeah,
go ahead because I don't
I've
remember off the top
predicted
of my
that
head.
I've predicted that they're going to lose every round except maybe the first. I might have had them beaten Tampa or Toronto. Um, But my logic after that was that they got to be out of gas. They've played so
Right.
much hockey the last 2 years. They made the Stanley Cup Final 2 years ago. They
Well,
won the Stanley Cup and then partied all summer last year. Like
it's
they can't possibly still have energy now. And
and
then
and
here
they're
comes Ichu Luostarinen.
right. Well, and they're gonna be like obviously they're here now, so they're gonna be here for like they're gonna be in the final this year. Next year's gonna be fascinating to me with them because now I want to see how they even try to replicate that.
Matthew Tkachuk just gets a worse injury every year. Like it's insane. Like I remember when he broke his sternum against the Vegas Golden Knights, and like
I know.
I thought he was never going to be the same player again because of how long he played through it.
Yeah, next
And
year he's lifting a Stanley Cup.
the dude is Iron Man. He
I
comes
know.
back every year and just has more metal in his body and is just better.
All right, so are we on to the want to go on to the other series?
Well,
Or do you
yeah.
have a
So
couple
was
more
there
notes on
any?
this?
I was about to ask if there was anything else we wanted to talk about in this series. I know we talked about the fact that it's kind of just Florida killing the Carolina Hurricanes, and that's really
I
all
mean,
there is to it.
Florida's the well-oiled machine team right now. Like they just have been.
Yeah,
And then what's interesting is that see for me, like you kept looking for a reason why it wasn't going, not looking for, but like you had a reason why it wasn't going to happen from preseason. This was my pick to make the Stanley Cup final because
yeah,
I just couldn't find another team that I felt like was as complete. And it doesn't mean that they were great in the regular season by any stretch. They had
they
their
weren't.
moments, but why? Because guys got hurt. Tkachuk goes down
Yep.
with injury for a little while, and you got to say, I mean, are we kidding ourselves here, or did they lose game 4 to make this a little bit more interesting of a series because Reinhart didn't play, and who else sat out that game?
It was Reinhardt.
There were a couple of guys.
Yeah, there were a couple of
I thought it was
major
defensively.
guys.
I thought it was defensively.
Did Bennett sit out?
No, I thought Bennett played.
Okay.
I wanted to believe it was like Reinhart, and I have the roster report up, so I can actually tell you.
Oh, okay.
Reinhart, Mikkola, Samaskevich didn't play. Well, that was game 4. Maybe it was game 3 I'm thinking of, and they still won, which would be even funnier, honestly.
No, I think game 4 was the game that all the guys sat.
Well, Reinhart didn't play game 4. That one I
Okay.
know.
Yeah, I do remember seeing Mikkola too. That makes sense.
But there's another one of those lower end guys for you. Reinhart didn't play
Yeah.
game 3. Reinhart didn't play game 3 either. But
Okay.
so maybe that's also part of it that Reinhart didn't play, like, and he just kind of go, so, you know, like just take out a guy who last year had all the goals that he did. So,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
no big deal. Replaceable. But yeah, as far as the series go, like I mentioned, I think Rod Brindamore is the most grateful person on planet Earth that Pete DeBoer had the meltdown he did, because I think it takes a lot of the attention off of Rod, and in Carolina, it's pretty easy to kind of slip away and let that attention fade. So,
sure. So let's
um,
move on to the West final here.
yep, and the West Conference Final was, man, it was a better series than the East, just because I don't know if you could get 5 worse conference final games than we had out East. But as it sits in the West, because again, man, at least this series had Connor McDavid. But for whatever reason, the Dallas Stars just could not get going in this
The
series. The
the
Edmonton
Dallas
Oilers learned how to play defense to refer to.
Like, this is how bad this is because I was about to sit there and talk about how many goals Dallas scored in the first game of the series.
Yeah.
I actually really should amend this. Dallas scored 5 goals in the third period of game 1 to win that game,
Yep.
and then scored 5 for the remaining 4 games of the series.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna mention we talked about
And am I crazy to say this, but didn't Robertson have 4 of the 5? He had 2 in game 5, 2 of the 3 Stars goals, and then they had 1 in the other 2 games, and I think they both were him.
Yeah, that sounds right. But yeah,
Like
and
Mikko Rantanen's hot streak faded hard.
Man, as soon as he stopped playing teams that traded him this year, he got a lot worse.
And you had that, and then pretty much pick any other forward on the roster and ask, where were you? You know, Wyatt Johnston, where were you? Matt Duchene, where were you? Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, where were you? Like beyond game one specifically. Like game one, they kind of came out like gangbusters. And then, you know, because again, you had another situation where by the end of this series, Edmonton's down a key player, a guy who can score a lot of goals. You know, Zach Hyman's done for the year. We know it already. Done.
Yep.
And it didn't matter in that series.
Nope.
You know, what they're about to face, it might, but
it certainly will, yeah.
But
Well, and I think the loss of Zach Hyman will be more impactful on, you know, the crease than it will be on the score sheet, right? Just in terms of impact on the game. But no, for this series, game 2, the Edmonton Oilers win 3-0. Game 3, the Edmonton Oilers win 6-1. Game 4, the Edmonton Oilers win 4-1. You know what those things have in common? The Dallas Stars didn't score more than 1 goal.
I know.
Which means, if you would like to blame Jake Ottinger for these losses, Pete, then you are expecting perfection. Because to win those games, he would have had to give up 0.
Essentially,
and for your 26-year-old goaltender, 25-year-old goaltender, who is in year 1 of 8 as your franchise goaltender,
right?
And like you said, man, like there's a world where you pull him 2 goals on 2 shots in a game 7. Like there are ways you can justify that decision. Like I don't necessarily think either goal was his fault. There were some pretty hefty defensive breakdowns in front of him. The first one was an absolute breakaway from the top of the circles in. So I don't really know what you expect your goalie to do in that situation. But yeah, sure, blame him.
I do think it was funny that Edmonton goes up in that game 3-0 on goals by. Well, I don't want to say guys you don't expect to score because Corey Perry's been scoring an awful lot. Like
insane.
Like I think I heard it somewhere. Corey Perry ended up with more. I think it was on one of the Dangle podcast episodes that Corey Perry had more goals or has more goals in the playoffs right now than every other Dallas Star not named Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah. And then you know the more insane stat?
What's that?
I don't know if you listened to their most recent podcast, but Corey Perry has more playoff games played since the year 2000 or whatever year he came
I've
into the
heard
league.
this thing. It's how many teams though? It's like 5 or
then
half the league.
No. Then I believe every team as far as playoff games go.
Maybe it is. I don't know. I saw something. I did see something about this.
Corey Perry has played 230 career playoff games, which is just insane.
Okay, I'm going to add something to this in a minute because first of all, by the way, so so Perry's maybe not as less likely of a goal scorer. He's been scoring a lot, obviously, but you're not expecting a goal from Matthias Janmark. You're not, Jeff Skinner just gets plopped into the lineup for Hyman and scores first. I believe it was his first playoff game, wasn't it? Or
second.
It was first playoff goal, and he was just fine. But either way.
Yeah, he had played their first playoff game, and they made a big deal about Jeff Skinner's playing his first playoff game. This was the first game he had played since then.
Now I mentioned that
game 1 of the first round.
I mentioned that Robertson has 2 goals. He gets the first one. It gets it to 3-1. The other goal scores. This is the only other guy who scored a goal in the last 4 games for the Dallas Stars, not named Jason Robertson. And Rope Hintz, who you got to give credit to because he's on 1 freaking foot.
Yep.
Rope
Hintz receives probably the nastiest play of the postseason so far, just in terms of mean-spiritedness.
Yeah.
Darnell Nurse with an absolute axe smash on the top of his foot, which Rope Hintz did confirm after the series broke or fractured.
There's a fracture. Yep.
So then, when he came back 2 games later and the Oilers thought he was faking, so Evan Bouchard gave him a little friendly whack on top. Thanks a lot, Evan. That's just kind of a slime ball move. But
Evan Bouchard's going to make a boatload of money on his next contract.
Well, and it turns out you don't win NHL playoff games by being a good person.
No, you don't.
Somehow Jamie Benn lost this series, but regardless. Uh,
Well, hang
but
on.
yeah, so
I mean, you just brought up that one of the difference makers or difference making decisions for the Florida Panthers was Paul Maurice. You did
yes.
see the clip? I'm sure you've seen it because it circulated a lot. I think I don't
Yeah,
normally
which one are you
I
talking
don't
about?
I don't normally repost a lot of stuff that like isn't Flyers related. I had to with this because I thought I'm like they just keep getting better to me a little bit. And he explained this conversation about how, when I was in Winnipeg, I hate's a strong word, but I hated Matthew Tkachuk. Then he gets here and you realize he's a really nice guy. It's just, we have a bunch of nice guys. Sam Bennett's a really nice guy. He and his wife raise money for cats and dogs and things like that. And
I'm sure they're all nice
and
people off the ice.
he goes, they're nice, they're really great guys. And then the puck drops
Right.
and whatever. And his analogy for it is that there's a time and place for certain things. So he goes, he had asked a reporter who had presented a question, I guess, have you ever shotgunned a beer? And the guy says yes, and he goes, okay, do you go to church or something
Yep.
or a spiritual experience?
Okay.
And he goes,
I know the one.
would you shotgun a beer in church? No, because like it doesn't seem like
There's context.
there's context to that, right? And so he ends the whole thing with sometimes you say a prayer, sometimes you shotgun a beer. Just
Absolutely.
brilliant though. Like
It's a good one out of Paul Maurice. Yeah.
and I think that's the point. Like the point is also Edmonton's playing that game too. They know, and maybe that's the biggest thing going into the final is that they know. I think last year
Oh,
they
yeah.
didn't know. Like Florida comes into the Stanley Cup Final and goes, "Yeah, we were here last year. We know
No,
what it
we're
takes,
done.
and
Yep.
we're ready for this." And you can think you are, but you're not. And because if I'm not mistaken, that was a 3-0 series that ended up back for a game
Mhm.
7 afterwards. And it's like, yeah, it kind of took Edmonton 2-3 games to kind of realize what kind of fight you're in for.
That series was 3 separate series. Game
Yeah,
1 through
kind of.
3 was the first series, game 4 through 6 was the second series, and then game
And then you
7
had a
was a
game
series
7,
all to
which
itself.
turned out to be a really good game 7. So I'm hopeful of
Exactly.
that kind of series moving forward. But Edmonton kind of, you know, and it's weird because you could make like Dallas, their core Dallas does not know what it's like to be in the Stanley Cup Final, but they know what it's
Right.
like to be in a conference final. They've been here.
Absolutely.
This is 3
Yeah,
years
and
running they've been here, and it's like
right.
at some point in time, you've got to find that other gear that gets you past the team like this.
Yep. And they were
And
hoping Mikko Rantanen was that gear.
yeah, well, and you got Mikko Rantanen for the long haul now.
Yeah, absolutely, and
So
it's interesting because I feel like our conversation in the East was mostly about how good Florida was, and our conversation in the West is mostly about the failing of the Dallas Stars. Because it really does feel that way, right? Like we look on the other side, and it's like, okay, well, you have Drysdale, you have McDavid, you have Ryan Nugent Hopkins has had a really great playoffs. Stuart Skinner has looked solid in the especially in this series.
I'm not laughing at what you're saying. I'm scrolling through Twitter X right now, and
Absolutely.
while we've been doing this, Kevin Weeks just put a picture up of the American Airlines Center with eyeballs.
Yes, of course, Pete DeBoer has to be fired because here's the thing. Immediately, we all thought the memes about Jake Ottinger and Patrick Waugh were by the dozens, especially as he's sitting next to Ray Ferraro while Ray Ferraro is breaking down how bad a job he did. And we immediately make the Patrick Waugh reference, and
So
then
it's
it
either
comes out today that Jason Robertson, may not necessarily want to stay in town long term. And at a certain point, if you are Jim Nill, if you are, Dallas Stars management and ownership, you got to make a call, man. And
well, right. Well, the funny part
and-
is that
yeah.
every one of the replies on this is exactly right. Either DeBoer's gone or something big just is going down.
And listen, I'm going to say it into a camera right now as we record this. If that's Jason Robertson to the Flyers, I'm thrilled. I don't really care what the price is. I don't think that's what happened. But hey,
22,
listen, I
22
got to
at
say
least
it.
22 at least one of those seconds in Cam York.
I would do more than that, frankly.
I think it might be more than that. I'm trying to give you a starting point.
How about
Because it won't be 6. So 22, a second round pick this year, and at least somebody on that side of things, like I said, like a Cam York, and then maybe somebody a little lesser.
what if it's 22 and bunk?
wouldn't be, I wouldn't be opposed.
Yeah.
This isn't
Well,
this
and
isn't this isn't the same thing as some of the other things people have been trying to put Bonk into trades for.
right,
This is a 40-goal
Jason
scorer.
Jason Robertson is a superstar.
Well, a lot of people, like, I saw somebody float the idea that, like, okay, what's one of the biggest things with Jet Lachenko? Oh, he didn't shoot enough. He's not enough of a goal scorer. He's too pass first. Do you care how pass first Jet Lachenko is if he's centering a line between Jason Robertson and Matvei Michkov? No, you want him to get them the puck. That's the point.
Yep. I want him to be the F3 on every rush.
You want him to be the guy with 60 assists at the end of the year because the other two guys have 30 goals apiece.
I want him to be the guy with 90 assists at the end of the year, frankly.
Because the power play is that damn good. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Literally. But all right, back to this series because we don't have any news on that quite yet.
I think we should. Well, are we shifting to
Yeah.
the final at this point?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say, on
Right,
the other
so-
side, you just
so-
kind of have McDavid, Draisaitl,
Right.
and crew doing their thing.
So real quick, by the way, there's the bracket for everybody who likes to see that type of format.
That's a whole lot of 4-1, 4-2 series.
I know that's what and that's the thing about the conference finals I was disappointed about was I'm really like,
Even
okay,
the semis,
you
only one game 7.
you expect the first round to look the way that it does sometimes.
Absolutely.
The second
Even
round,
in the first round, we only got 2 game 7s.
right? But
And they were
I'm
both in the Central.
But that's why I'm saying you kind of expect it to be maybe a little bit more lopsided nature. Things like,
Right.
I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to tell you right now. Looking at this bracket and recognizing, like, just look at the lower right corner.
Yeah, I was actually going to look just how bad are the New Jersey Devils if they lost 4-1 to this Carolina Hurricanes team.
And that's not really. I know you're trying to take one more dig there. I get it, but this is why the Flyers think they can get back into the playoffs faster.
Why wouldn't you? This is why the Penguins think they can get into the playoffs. This is why the Islanders think they can get back into the playoffs. This is why every metropolitan team should be looking at the playoffs next year because they're terrible.
And I'm not able to, like, I can't draw on this thing, so I wish I could. I wish we could do Telestrator mode right
day
here.
You pick up Telestrator skills, we're unstoppable.
I know. Oh yeah, so I can pull video up here and be
so you can PK Subban it. Absolutely.
No, I don't. Stop it. I don't go off of PK Subban. I want to go back to the days of Dorney.
Oh,
stop it right there.
Love that.
Right, stop it right there.
Yeah. Roll it back a little bit.
So, like, you're looking at this whole thing. What really was the Eastern Conference Final? It's the series it's the semi-series that's at the top right side.
Absolutely.
It was there were your two best teams in the Eastern Conference, and they just happened to play in the second round.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. So on to the big one.
Yes, sir. So for the second year in a row, the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final. It is a reversal of last year in that the Florida Panthers have the home ice advantage. Or I'm sorry, the
Oilers.
We start in Edmonton this year. Yep. So that means if there is a Game 7 like last year, it will be in Edmonton instead. And I got to tell you, I don't know if the world is ready for a Stanley Cup Final Game 7 in Canada. Oof. That will be a fun one, especially Edmonton.
Yeah, I totally.
Right.
Totally with the location thing. I mean, I kind of think already that you're starting there is a big deal. I mean, like,
yeah, I agree.
Because this is how many times is it? It's the second, or this is the third time Edmonton's been to the Cup Final. Like I'm talking 06, 20, 24, and now 25, right?
Yeah. It's Connor McDavid's
even in 06, you started on the road with that one. It was games 1 and 2 in Carolina, so Game 7 was in Carolina. Like,
so this is the first Stanley Cup Final Game 1 in Canada. In a
long time.
Well, yeah, Montreal didn't have home.
No, Montreal was definitely the lower seed.
Although that technically was in Canada. I'm just saying. Both bubbles were in Canada.
Well, no, Montreal was not the bubble year. The Cup Final in the bubble year was Tampa Dallas.
You're right. You are correct. Yes.
Which ironically was hosted in Edmonton.
Right.
So Edmonton
has seen Stanley Cup Final games.
Sure. So I don't know. I mean, now you're making me rack my brain a little bit over, like, how far back do I have to go to find the last Cup Final that started in Canada?
Yeah, because Montreal didn't make a Cup Final
Well, Montreal.
earlier with Price, did they?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, let's put it this way: for a while, there was just no Canadian team even in it. Like,
No,
like,
no.
like you're thinking about like if I'm going back to,
Ottawa 2017 was close, I guess.
well, but that was still that ended up being
Yep.
Pittsburgh and San
Well,
Jose
right.
in 17. It was Pittsburgh, Nashville. Then it was
Yep.
Chicago. Who would Chicago play? What was the West? So it would have been an Eastern Conference. Like I have to figure out who the East team was. That was
Who
Chicago
beat
played.
15?
Well,
Was it
Chicago.
Boston?
So Chicago. No, Boston
No,
was
Boston was 13.
13. The Flyers were
10.
10. Who was 15 then? Oh, Tampa.
Oh, it was Tampa.
So
Yeah,
so,
yeah, 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 yeah.
so again, you're down. Like there's another year. You had Rangers. It was Kings Rangers the one year. It was Kings
Yep.
Devils the other year. The Kings won. It was so that might be it.
2010 to
20 no
2015
so
suck
20
from a
so
cup
it's 20 so
perspective.
that's what it is. I just got it. It's 2011. Vancouver
Wow.
hosted Boston because
Wow.
Boston
Oh
won
yeah,
that series in Game
because
7 in
Game
Vancouver.
7 in Vancouver. Yeah. So for the first time since 2011, the Stanley Cup Final starts in Canada on Wednesday evening. This is a rematch from last year, and you mentioned that the Oilers found out last year what it means to get there and lose. The Panthers found out what it means to get there and win after losing the year prior. What do you got for this one, Kevin?
I mean, it's going to be I think it's going to be a great series because both teams
Yep.
know what to expect. I don't think
Yep.
so. I have it going 7, which you know what that means for me. I'm not
Means it's
surprised
a
by either
toss-up.
team winning, but I don't think it's going to go 7 the way it did last year. Like, I don't think you're going to see 3-0, 3-3, and then a game 7. I think you're going to see more of that balanced attack, whether it's 2-0 to 2-2 or 1-1, 2-2 kind of deal, whatever. Sorry, Canada. I'm picking the Florida Panthers.
Yeah. Okay. So you have the Panthers in 7, which of course does mean it's a toss-up and anybody could win. So my problem with this one is that my head and my heart are conflicted.
Sure.
You know what? I'm the fan voice on this podcast. I
We'll go
don't
for it.
care. Edmonton in 7. I want to see. I think it is good for the league to watch Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl lift the cup in Edmonton.
I don't disagree with you.
I think that feeds generations in Edmonton.
Now, there's
I
a
think it
couple.
also, quite frankly, I think it also creates a new generation in Edmonton. There's going to be a lot of Connors born in 9 months, but
Sure. There's
but I really do think
there's
that when you put the best player on planet Earth in a situation where he loses, like he did last year, especially with the cameras following him and his, dig the bleep in clip that went everywhere, and he was really in center stage for the first time in his career that he has not been in a very long time, just given his role as the greatest player on planet Earth, and finally the team is living up to some of that from a team perspective.
So,
and I think he learns from that, and I don't think he lets that feeling happen 2 years in a row.
So he was okay. The cameras caught him with all that type of stuff. It was what was that? Still first period, second period, something like that.
I think that was after the first period. They were down 3-0.
No, I thought it was close to the end of the series. I thought it was somewhere in Game 7 where he was yelling about dig in.
Maybe, were they down 2-0 after one in that game? I
No,
can't remember.
that game was tied 1-1 at one point, but I don't
you're
remember.
right. Okay.
I don't remember if it was like maybe it was that going to the third period and it was like, listen, dig in. It's Game 7, 20 minutes.
Maybe that
dig
was
in,
it. Yeah,
or whatever. What I'm going to go back to though is that when it's all over with, now he's not saying anything. He's quiet. He's just he's depressed over it. He's beside himself because it felt like a chance,
Absolutely. When you're that close and you don't get there, yeah.
And I believe I saw that people said it's Zach Hyman who's saying we'll be back next year, or like it's coming. We're meant to do this. Like we'll be back and we're gonna finish it.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk said it in the handshake line. He said to Connor McDavid, we'll see you next year. Like they knew.
Sure, but I'm saying what I'm trying to get at is that there's now added significance that it was Hyman, who's now not going to play.
Right. Yeah,
And that is, and it is my one worry about picking the Panthers is exactly what
absolutely.
you just said. Connor McDavid is having a year that he might not like. No, he might not win the Hart Trophy, and he might not be. He might not have. Well, no, he is always the point guy, but like he might not win the Hart Trophy and be, that guy, the MVP of the league. Not for regular season.
Right.
But he did score the clinching goal in Four Nations and put himself right back in that spotlight like that then.
Absolutely.
And
And
so could you just see this year ending with him getting the Stanley Cup finally? Not to mention, I saw somebody else also bring up, Gretzky goes to a cup final in 83 and loses. The next year he's back and he wins. And Sidney Crosby went to a cup final in 2008 and lost. And the next year he's back and he wins. And now Connor McDavid has lost a cup final and is back. And, maybe you just follow the trend of the greatest here and just win the second time around.
Well, and by the way, those were all rematches.
Yeah.
Gretzky, Islanders in 82, Islanders in 83. Crosby, Detroit in 08, Detroit in 09.
Yeah, now you're doing the same thing. Yeah, I know.
Exactly. Yep.
Crazy.
And yeah. So we sit here and the Stanley Cup Final gets underway on Wednesday night. You got the greatest team or the greatest player on planet Earth versus your defending Stanley Cup champion. So if you're
well-oiled machine team against the greatest bunch of players that you might find right now, because a lot of them are playing out of their mind great.
Absolutely.
Including their goalie.
And I'm hoping because especially Florida had a little bit of an easier trip and both teams got their conference finals done in 5. I'm hoping everybody's well rested, everybody's bringing a ton of energy, and we're ready to go for game 1. So all right, that is going to do it for us here. We will be back after the Stanley Cup Final, depending on exactly how long it goes. We're working on the schedule there as far as a show, but there will definitely be a show after the Stanley Cup Final and before the draft starts. So come back here for your Stanley Cup Final rematch, your draft, a little bit of draft preview, whatever else we have to go into in Flyers land. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com, and make sure to check out our YouTube channel. Hit the like button over there. It really helps us out. So, all right then. We got somewhere between 4 and 7 games left in this hockey season, and then we're off to the draft, free agency. Finally,
the fun stuff.
Yeah, the fun stuff for a team as bad as the Flyers. So. Until then, next show, we might actually have some Flyers stuff to talk about moving forward. But until then, stay safe.